The Jeffrey Dahmer Story, Mind of a Killer. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, the world-famous serial killer of Milwaukee, committed one of the most gruesome and horrific acts of murder and cannibalism ever seen. This case is so famous for the crimes, the unique method of body disposal, his behavior during the trials, the courtroom drama, the international attention to the reaction of the public, and of course, the recent Netflix series. Loved and hated for many reasons, Jeffrey Dahmer was indeed a monster in human form.
We have reason to believe that a maniac.
I don't accept the whole situation.
Sentenced Theodore Bundy to die in the electric chair for the
Brother and sister. As the cadence of a beautiful thoughts on the
investigator's blade, suspected Francis Templeton.
The day he was caught. In the 1980s and 1990s, the poor economic situation in Milwaukee led to a rise of crimes involving theft, assault, drugs, and alcohol, which kept police officers on longer patrols. Around 11:30 p.m. on the 22nd of July, 1992, patrol officers Rolf Mueller and Robert Roth, while on patrol, were startled by a 32-year-old man wearing nothing but underwear, running towards their car. Tracy Edwards had fear written all over his face, with a pair of handcuffs dangling from his wrists, while asking police for help. Their first assumption was that he had escaped from being apprehended by the police, but a confirmation made it clear that that wasn't the situation. Why was this half-naked man wearing handcuffs and roaming around at that time of night? Tracy Edwards explained that a crazy white dude had threatened, assaulted, and kept him captive. He asked for help with unlocking the handcuffs, but the police tried and couldn't, as it was an older make. The police officers assumed it was a case of drug abuse that led to sexual activities, which escalated to a physical altercation. The police escorted him back to the apartment of whom they assumed was his boyfriend to uncuff him. Apartment 924, North 25th Street, was a building almost 50 years old. It housed mostly African Americans, employed, law-abiding citizens, some with children. Upon entering, the police officers were overwhelmed by a rancid smell in the apartment. They knocked on apartment 213. The door was opened by Jeffrey Dahmer, a 31-year-old white man, blonde, handsome, masculine, with a faint scar on his right eye, wearing aviator glasses. He was 6 feet tall, quiet, and docile. They did find it a bit weird that a white man lived in an African-American dominated apartment, but they focused on what they came for. They asked that he uncuff the man. Edwards had mentioned earlier that he was threatened with a knife inside the bedroom, so Officer Mueller entered the room for a quick search. And not long after he did he find a kitchen knife poking out from under the bed. This prompted him to search a bit longer. When he went through the drawers, he saw several dozen Polaroid pictures of naked men. Looking closely at the pictures, he soon realized the men in them were not alive. Some pictures showed men with decapitated heads, rotting flesh, defleshed skulls, and dismembered arms and legs in different stages of decomposition. Mueller ran out of the room and attempted to arrest the apartment owner, who had turned violent trying to run away. He was apprehended, and backup was called right away. Tracy Edwards informed the officers that something was in the fridge, as he had previously tried to open it, but was stopped just hours earlier. The police officers opened the fridge to see an African-American's head in cardboard before their eyes. Mueller did not realize when he let out a scream. Jeffrey Dahmer looked at them and said, "For what I did, I should be dead." Forensics and police officers soon surrounded the apartment. Out of the crime scene came beer cans, 2 plastic gargoyle figures, a Bible, gay pornography, framed pictures of naked men, an odor absorber and incense sticks, an electric drill with blood and brain matter, a claw hammer, hypodermic needles, chemical-resistant gloves, 4 boxes of muriatic acid, 6 bottles of Smilax used to break down organic matter, bleach, chloroform, a collection of driver's licenses and identity cards of victims, 2 plastic bags with frozen human hearts, frozen, particularly eaten human bicep, 74 Polaroids, human viscera, decapitated heads, intestines, dismembered torso, 2 human skulls bleached to white, an aluminum kettle with penis and testicles, covered with skeleton, among other things. The interrogation of Jeffrey Dahmer took 60 hours, and he confessed to all his crimes, gunning for an insanity plea. Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood. The question asked in cases involving serial killers is what made them into the monster they became. His past doesn't really answer those questions. You see, Jeffrey Dahmer was born to Joyce and Lionel Dahmer, who got married when they were both 23 years old. Lionel Dahmer was a student and spent most of his time studying away from his family, from basic degree to a master's, then a PhD. Joyce Dahmer had dwindling mental health, taking a lot of sedatives and antidepressants, and sometimes overdosing on them. Joyce used to work as a teletype instructor, but soon quit following health issues while being pregnant with Jeffrey. Apart from a correction cast to straighten Dahmer's leg, no abnormality was found when Dahmer was born. Dahmer was described as a happy and normal child in his early childhood. He had a fascination with animals and kept a lot as pets. At this point, no form of animal cruelty was observed. He genuinely liked animals. Jeffrey, in his early childhood, contracted an ear infection, hernia, and pneumonia. He underwent surgery for the hernia. After the surgery, he frequently complained about pain in his genitalia. From this point on, he transformed from happy to reserved. The Dahmers' marriage was filled with a lot of fights and verbal abuse. Joyce would accuse Lionel of neglect, as he was never around, and Lionel would accuse Joyce of behaving pitifully to get attention. In a bid to help their marriage, they would join a Christian sect and have another child later on. As a child, Jeffrey was fascinated by anatomy and always wondered about the insides and bones of animals. He would often listen to heartbeats. Once during class, a pig was dissected, and he asked if he could take the head home. He would preserve insects in containers and keep them. He once asked his father to teach him how to bleach animal bones. He discovered his attraction to the same sex when he was 13, when he kissed a 10-year-old. He soon turned to masturbating and repressing his sexual attraction. At the age of 14, he became a heavy drinker who was never seen sober. He was reserved, but was still considered a bit of a class clown, as he would often play pranks. His grades would steadily decline till they couldn't any further. He would soon start to dissect animals and place their heads on pikes and decorate trees with their insides. He did claim that the animals were already dead. Lionel and Joyce had tried marriage counseling, but it did not fix their relationship. After an incident where Joyce boasted of having an affair, they settled on a divorce that was finalized in December 1977. Joyce, who got custody of David and Jeffrey, was barely around, so Dahmer was left all alone, making him more of a drunk and even more withdrawn. Stephen Hicks. Jeffrey was on a ride in his father's car when 19-year-old shirtless Stephen Hicks caught his attention. Promising a ride, he convinced him to go to his house, where they both smoked and drank. Hicks asking to leave made Jeffrey Dahmer feel rejected. He took a 10-pound dumbbell and hit Hicks in the head. An altercation occurred, and Dahmer hit him in the head one more time and proceeded to strangle him. He stripped his corpse naked and kissed his face, hands, and chest. He then proceeded to grab his genitals, masturbate to his dead body, and ejaculate all over it. In an attempt to cover up his crime, he dismembered the body in his basement and played around with the organs, which got him aroused. He burned Hicks's personal belongings and then put his remains in garbage bags, riding out at night to dispose of them. Driving drunk, he had swerved off the road. He was spotted and approached by a patrol officer. He informed him that he was going to empty the trash at night because his parents were going through a messy divorce. The patrol officer made him take a sobriety test. During this time, there was no breathalyzer test, so they made him walk a straight line and touch his nose. He passed the test and was allowed to go free. He quickly went back home, knowing full well that if any body was found, it would be linked to him. He buried the remains in a drainage pipe. He kept the head and masturbated to it several more times, then buried it along with the rest of the body when the smell got rancid. Dahmer's university and army life. Lionel got remarried to his second wife, Sherry. Dahmer got accepted and went to school at Ohio State University, but he had no interest in school. His roommates regarded him as weird, and he would replay the same music over and over again, rarely attend class, and steal from his roommates to buy alcohol. His grades were poor, and he kept drinking, so he soon dropped out. Next stop, the Army. Jeffrey Dahmer enlisted in the military not long after, as advised by his father. He trained to be an Army medic and soon became a medical assistant, training that would soon aid his future crimes. He never kissed women, which made his fellow soldiers hire a female prostitute to have sex with him. He still didn't have sex, so they concluded he was gay. There were 5 unsolved murders where he was stationed with the same strangulation and mutilation MO, but they were mostly females, so it seemed most likely not him. Jeffrey Dahmer's drinking habits got too bad, and he was given an honorable discharge. He went back home and excavated Stephen's remains using a sledgehammer to break down the bone that was left, and then scattered the fragments in the forest. Moving in with his grandmother. Dahmer moved in with his grandmother, Catherine Dahmer. In a bid to rationalize his deed, he got into Satanism and drank blood from where he worked drawing blood. He did not like the taste and soon turned to religion for an answer. He began to masturbate less and took to reading the Bible. He even turned down an offer to be given a blowjob by a man. His change wouldn't last long though, and in 1984, he stopped going to church and started heavily masturbating and drinking heavily once more. He would watch porn videos several times a day, and his problem escalated to him exposing his penis to men. He masturbated in front of 12-year-old boys, but managed not to get arrested. He would ride public transportation to press his penis hard against men's backsides. He got aroused by a male mannequin. He stole it and went through sexual fantasies with it. Jeffrey also molested his brother David when he came to visit. In 1985, he began picking up men, but he was on the receiving end and soon realized he preferred penetrating. On June 6, 1986, he began working in a chocolate factory and had a lot of night shifts. He lied to his doctor that he had trouble sleeping to get sleeping pills prescribed. He used these pills to drug men in bathhouses and sexually assaulted them while they were passed out. He once again drugged and raped a Chinese-American man who fell into a coma. From then on, he was banned from bathhouses in Milwaukee and committed his rape crimes in Chicago bathhouses. In 1987, he saw an obituary for an attractive 18-year-old boy. He attempted to exhume the body, but was scared off by a dog barking. Stephen Tuomi. He went to a hotel with a fry cook, Stephen Tuomi. They kissed and masturbated to each other. He drugged him, caressing, cuddling, and masturbating to him. He had drunk too much alcohol, so he blacked out. He woke up on top of a dead Stephen Tuomi. While blacked out, he smashed his rib cage in an attempt to remove his heart. Dahmer cleaned the whole hotel and checked out with the body of Stephen in the suitcase. In his basement, he drained his blood, dismembered the body, and decapitated it with a butcher's knife. He scraped the skin off, putting the internal organs in a garbage bag. He smashed the bones with a sledgehammer and threw them all in a trash can. He kept the decapitated head for 2 weeks, masturbating to it. He then melted the flesh off it, bleached the skull, smashed it, and threw it away inside the trash. Stephen was reported missing, but never found. Not long after, he drugged, assaulted, and raped 23-year-old African-American Bobby Simpson while his grandmother was asleep. For the following months, at different intervals, he invited 2 more men to come to his home: 14-year-old James Dockstader and 23-year-old Mexican-American Richard Guerrero. He offered them money and lured them into his home. He had consensual sex, after which he drugged and assaulted them. He then strangled them, dismembered them, pulverized them, and smashed their bones, keeping their heads as always. They were reported missing by their family members, but again, they were never found. They both had criminal records, and the police did not make them priority. Ronald Flowers. 25-year-old African-American Ronald Flowers, on the 23rd of April 1988, accepted Dahmer's help when he had issues with his car. Dahmer took him to his house, drugged and sexually assaulted him. He dropped him off on a bus the next morning. He decided not to kill him because he was 250 pounds and his body would be hard to dispose of. Flowers reported it to the station, but Dahmer said he had nothing to do with it. His grandmother testified on his behalf, as she saw when he dropped off Ronald Flowers. Flowers saw Dahmer once more entering a cab with another man. He advised the man not to. This saved his life. Dahmer was soon told to move out of his grandmother's house, as he kept bringing in strangers and drinking. At this point, he was fond of wearing yellow contacts to bars to pick up men. He soon moved into a 1-bedroom apartment at 807 North 24th Street. Somsack Synthesymphone. He lured the 15-year-old Lao boy into his house with the promise of money. He took pictures of him and soon began to remove his clothes to listen to his heartbeat. He drugged the boy, but Somsack took his money and ran before the effects had hit him. Somsack's parents realized he was drugged and reported the event to the police. And after a short investigation, Jeffrey was arrested. He claimed he didn't know Somsack was underage, and he had given him coffee in a cup that he frequently used to take sleeping pills. Lionel paid his bail, and he was taken to see a psychiatrist who diagnosed him as paranoid and depressed. While awaiting his sentencing on March 20th, 1989, he picked up a 24-year-old African-American, Anthony Sears, an aspiring model. He had oral sex, and he then drugged him, strangled him, and dismembered him as well, which would become his MO. Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted of his crimes against Somsack and spent a year in prison, which was more like a dormitory for petty offenders. He was allowed to work at the chocolate factory and returned to prison after work. He got an early release on good behavior, but throughout his stay, he did not get psychiatric help. On the 14th of May, 1990, he moved into his Oxford apartment, which was close to the club, so it was easy to lure men home with him. In the following months, he lured 2 more men into his home, making promises of money just for pictures: 32-year-old African-American Raymond Smith and 27-year-old Edward Smith. He drugged, strangled, and dismembered them as well. He filled a gallon tub with muriatic acid and used it to liquefy them and flush the remains down the toilet. He had begun using a freezer to keep the bodies from rotting. He attempted putting Edward Smith's head inside the oven to dry it out, but it exploded He regarded the event as a waste. On July 6, 1990, he lured Louis Pinay into his house with a promise of money for posing for pictures. They had sex, and he spiked his drink and assaulted him. He attempted to kill Louis Pinay, but he couldn't. He walked him out of his apartment, paying for his cab ride. He drugged, sexually assaulted, and strangled and killed 5 more men in the following months, keeping their skulls as trophies. Ernest Miller, 17-year-old Curtis Straughter, David Thomas, 19-year-old Errol Lindsay, and 31-year-old Anthony Hughes. Unlike the Netflix movie portrayed, they were not lovers, but acquaintances. By this time, he wanted to try out zombification. He drilled holes into the heads of Errol Lindsay and Anthony Hughes and injected hydrochloric acid into them. Anthony Hughes died immediately, but Errol Lindsay lived, only to be killed by Jeffrey Dahmer. The slew of dead bodies took over the building. Thinking someone had died, the police were called. Dahmer's apartment was searched, but he claimed his freezer was faulty, and the meat in it got spoiled. Konarakt Synthesymphone. Jeffrey Dahmer struck again, this time targeting the brother of his survivor Somsak. Dahmer lured Konarakt Synthesymphone with the promise of money. He drugged the boy and sexually assaulted him. He drilled a hole in his head, injecting it with hydrochloric acid. Konarakt was able to escape while Jeffrey Dahmer went out to buy more alcohol. A driver and 2 women saw him and helped him. Dahmer spotted him on his way back and wanted to take him, but the boy protested. Paramedics and cops were called, and they treated him. When he was questioned, Dahmer lied that Konarakt was 19 years old and that he was his drunk lover. Despite the protests from the women, he was escorted back to Dahmer's house by the police officers. Dahmer showed them the Polaroid to prove they were lovers. The police searched too quickly, not noticing Anthony's dead body just laying on his bedroom floor. He injected Konarakt once more with hydrochloric acid, killing him. Glenda Cleveland and Sandra Smith, who had witnessed the crime, called the police officers for follow-up on the crime, but they were not taken seriously. She would later see Konarakt's missing picture in the newspaper, and she informed the police, but no action was taken. She informed the FBI, but it wasn't under their jurisdiction. It's important to note that Glenda did not live in the same apartment as Dahmer, but a block away, unlike as portrayed in the Netflix series. She was also not there when her daughter and niece witnessed the crime, and he did not force her in any way to eat a sandwich he made of human meat. She did not wake up at any time of the night listening to the sound of him killing people. In the following months, Jeffrey killed 4 more men: 20-year-old Matt Turner, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger, 23-year-old Oliver Lacey, and 25-year-old Joseph Braidhoft, using the same MO. Tracy Edwards. Jeffrey Dahmer had paid Tracy Edwards to come home with him to have a party. He managed to cuff one of his wrists. Tracy prevented him from cuffing both hands by keeping them far apart. He threatened him with a knife to watch The Exorcist. Listening to his heartbeat, he told him he would eat his heart. 5 hours later, Dahmer was intoxicated. Edwards asked to use the bathroom, and he used the opportunity to stand up, punch Jeffrey Dahmer in the face and chest, and run into the hallway. Dahmer begged him to come back, but he ran out of the building before encountering the police officers. Aftermath and public sentiment. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes swept the whole nation and world. What surprised people more was that he evaded the police for so long. Dahmer's crimes went on for longer because of the poor economic conditions during the time. There was a drug problem, no employment, and no structure in the state. This made it easy for Dahmer to lure people using money as incentive. Most of Dahmer's victims were African Americans, making it seem racially motivated. But Jeffrey Dahmer didn't just kill blacks, but whites, Mexicans, and Lao as well. But it is true that he was able to evade arrest because most of his victims were neglected because of their race and sexuality. The prejudice against them led to less focus on their cases. The police officers who let Dahmer go with Konsak lost their jobs as a result of their negligence. Konsak's family sued and was compensated with $850,000, $1.65 million when adjusted for inflation. Religious factions rose, blaming Dahmer's crimes on pornography and Satanism. A Baptist group came out saying that being gay is unholy and the crime was committed because he was gay. Oregon citizens came out saying he did nothing wrong since he only killed gay men. Veganism factions encouraging veganism said the exact thing Dahmer did was being done to animals daily. Oprah Winfrey even started a show asking, "Are you raising a Jeffrey Dahmer?" Some people wanted a memorial park built in memory of the victims, but a number protested as it would also be a shrine to Dahmer. There was a plan to sell Dahmer's belongings to whoever was interested in order to raise money that went to the victims' families. Joseph Zilber, a real estate mogul, raised $480,000, mostly of his own money, just so they would be buried in a landfill in Illinois. The trial. Dahmer's trial was held from July 25th to September 17th, 1991. He was indicted on 16 accounts of murder. He wasn't charged for Steve Tuomi because the remains could not be found, and he could not recall what happened that day. He pled innocent on the grounds of insanity. The trial was held to determine if he was insane. That would determine if he would be sent to jail or a mental asylum, where he would be rehabilitated and then returned to society. The arguments were surrounding whether he was aware of what he was doing. His trial turned racial and political. The security cost 10 times more than a regular trial, and a $15,000 8-foot glass barrier was bought to barricade him. Jerry Boyle, who handled his previous case, had represented him again. He wanted out-of-state jurors for a fair trial, but this request was denied as everyone from the world knew of Dahmer's crimes. 5 white men, 6 white women, and 1 black man were on the jury. The African Americans did not feel represented. Was he truly aware that what he was doing was wrong? The trial focused on his troubled childhood, obsession with viscera, and poor mental health. It was argued that he was not sadistic because he didn't inflict pain on the victims. He had drugged them, and they were always unconscious. It was also argued that it was also because he was trying to avoid confrontation. He knew what he was doing. That was why he went through all the trouble of dismembering and disposing of the corpses, but he had no control over it. He was diagnosed with necrophilia, psychosis, schizophrenia, and borderline personality disorder. He was found guilty and sentenced to 15 consecutive life imprisonments and 1 more life sentence in Ohio for the murder of Stephen Hicks. He got a total of 957 years in prison. Lionel, his father, sat with his second wife throughout the trial. He asked for 10 minutes alone with his son before he was taken away. Prison life and death. He was taken to Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. Jerry Boyle, Dahmer's lawyer, gave him 2 years before he would be murdered in prison, as high-profile criminals are usually killed in prison. In his first year in prison, Dahmer was kept in solitary confinement for danger to his life. He received many sentimental letters from women who found him attractive, despite knowing he was homosexual. He received a lot of fan letters. The gifts he received were enough for him to live a comfortable life in prison. He began to study the Bible and became born again. His pastor, prison staff, and father confirmed it was genuine. He was baptized, but still believed that he deserved to die. He believed he was an agent of evil, so he asked that he be taken from solitary confinement to a general ward, where there was a chance he would be killed. On July 31st, 1994, Osvaldo DeRuth, an African American, tried to slash his throat with a blade, but failed. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was on work duty in the prison gym, cleaning the showers with Jesse Anderson, who killed his wife and blamed it on flirtatious black men, and schizophrenic Christopher Carver, with a Messiah complex, who killed his wife's supervisor. While the prison guard was gone for 20 minutes, Scarver took a 20-inch metal bar and smashed Dahmer's head. He also killed Anderson. He immediately went to his cell and confessed to his crimes. He claimed God made him do it for the crimes against Black Americans. Dahmer died an hour after being rushed to the hospital. No funeral service, and he was cremated. Lionel and Joyce deliberated on what to do with his brain, but decided it would also be cremated. Lionel Dahmer wrote a book titled A Father's Story that gave people insight into how he felt being the father of an infamous killer. As for Jeffrey, it was an anticlimactic end to his extraordinary life.